recording started. But you know, the punchline is all this stuff is all political stuff. It'll end up working out one way or another.
No backbone, probably end up paying.
No, I don't think so.
There was like a week where the signs were down. What was up that week?
I have no idea.
Well,
Milwaukee
it's illegal
Lakefront
to have the
Marathon.
signs up to begin with, so.
It was the Milwaukee Lakefront Marathon. That's why.
I mean, we all have to do kind of our part. Like, you know, I think there was a problem early on where students were going by there and vandalizing the signs. Yeah, so I mean, that shouldn't be happening.
No. Boy, that's going to be a freshman.
Well, regardless, I mean, so, you know, at some point we all have to be kind of adults about it. And after everybody gets done screaming and all the lawyers get involved and stuff, I'm sure there will be some sort of constructive resolution towards making it better for everybody rather than spending 6 months screaming about it while it's continuing to erode. Just is what it is. And if I put myself in their shoes and I paid a lot of money for lakefront property and it was eroding, I'd be upset too. So, you know, you got to point fingers somewhere, but unfortunately, people get upset first and then they start thinking about the consequences later. Whatever. Okay, so if I remember, so you guys were to write the part for updating it, correct? The delete we left for today. Yeah, editing, right? Yeah. So the idea is, oh, I forgot I was going to give a quiz today. Nah, too late.
You should have 2 quizzes.
Too late.
One at the beginning, one at the end.
We should have one just because Beyonce.
No, he should.
Beyonce Prime is out getting his iPhone 6s right now, so we should have one just because of that.
Well, it's already too late. We've eaten our quiz time up. We got to progress because I got to be able to give you a really difficult assignment tonight. Otherwise, I have to give you one over break.
That's cool. I'll do that one instead.
No, you don't get to choose. You have to do as well. Like, with your track record, you don't actually have to do all the assignments I give, but you're supposed to. It's in your best interest from a grade perspective to do all the assignments. Okay, so if I remember correctly, last time we were running into some issues with our closure here of it not knowing about a function below, I think is what the issue was. So when we had our delete going, we decided that, well, here, let's just run this real quick. So I think right now we have the context thing showing up. The quiz question, for if you're interested, was going to be, we'll see if you guys can answer it, is by what mechanism is a context menu displayed in an Apple Watch application?
What's the question?
How do you get a context menu to display in an Apple Watch application?
Force touch?
Yeah, force touch. So long touch on the screen.
No, a deep touch.
Deep touch.
A
Deep
long
touch.
touch won't do it.
Well,
Long touch does
that's
something else. You know what a long touch does, right?
Wasn't it Command 2?
Command 2 gives you a deep touch.
No? Oh, yeah.
Command 2 just gives you a
That,
long touch.
yeah, that was shrinking thing. All right, so this guy pops up. If we click delete right now, we're able to respond to the delete. It's calling the right thing. I think we say delete back here in our code, right? Or we were at least at some point. Let's see.
You're good, sick.
Well, don't get me sick. I'm going out of town in 2 days. Let's see. All right, so things were going into different modes. So now we're in, actually, didn't I just do, oh, I did the deep touch again. There's that. Now I need to switch to regular touch, then delete. Now we're in delete mode. So anytime I click on something now, it should pop up asking me if I want to delete this or cancel. If I hit confirm, it should actually do the delete. If I don't, it should just go back to the way things were before. So if I happen to hit the confirm button, a couple things we need to do. One, we need to remove that particular role that we're deleting from our global the roles. Then we need to update user defaults so it's not there the next time we launch the application. And finally, we need to rebuild the table so it's not there, right? Okay, so let's come in here. So here is that confirm code right here. So delete alert confirm. If they click confirm, it's going to come into this code right here. So this is where we're saying delete the current row from the roles. So we're saying data roller core or dice roller core dot the roles dot remove at index. So the issue here is actually getting the index that we clicked. All right. So you have to come down here. And we need to do the did select row at index code here. So we're going to have to set whenever we click on an index, we're going to have to set a global variable letting us know what index we clicked on, right? We need to know that value. So we're going to go ahead, we're going to give ourselves a variable up here. So let's do var cur selected index. We'll start that off at -1. All right, then down here, we'll just go ahead and we'll say self.cur selected index is equal to row index. Okay. So now if we are inside of this confirm closure, that means that we are in delete mode and we're trying to remove this guy at position self dot. Yeah, see, was that the issue? Do we not have access to cur selected index? Cannot be used.
Can you pass in through the lambda for selected index?
Well, we wouldn't be able to automatically. The guy who raises this so here's the delete context. So we're calling it update mode label. Actually, hold on, let's go back here. Here's the did select. Representing the view controller with title delete. This is our confirm delete. Deleter. So delete alert cancel, delete alert confirm. Yeah, I don't think there's a way for us to get at that. So it seems like if we want to be able to handle this, we're going to have to actually store the selected row inside of our dice. Our dice roller. Go ahead. Where's that? Oh, singletons.
If you make cur selected index static, will it work?
Well, you probably could make it work then, but if you're going to do that, you might as well throw it into your. Although we're not sharing it across multiple screens, so I suppose you could do this. You could say, as you're saying, make this static, and then we would see main screen IC. That guy. And then we grab that value here. See, the issue here is and that worked. So the issue is that when we're inside of this closure is happening in its own environment, its own variable environment, where it does not know about the stuff that's out here. It only knows what's happening in its little world here.
Law of closures. Like, why wouldn't we want to have, access to at least the local scope beyond that?
In the parentheses, can you pass variables in when you're initializing the lambda?
Well, in general, you could if you're writing your own closure
Right,
handlers.
Because you're passing through the alert, it has to be.
The alert doesn't do any passing on its own. We're reliant on what the alert tries to do.
Okay.
So when they design the alert, the present alert screen, it doesn't automatically try to pass a parameter.
Okay.
So having said that, I think what we could do,
Right, like a
I think you could create, instead of passing it as a closure, I think you could actually have another function as the handler. So I think we could do this. Let's just test this real quick. Here, I'm gonna just delete that. Let's just print something. So print deleting row main screen IC dot, what was it? Cur selected index? No. Yeah, cur selected index. All right, so let's just make sure this works the current way, and then I want to try an alternative to the closure. Because right now we're inlining a closure. And I'm not sure it's necessarily a weakness as long as we can accomplish what we're going to try to accomplish the other way. So let's do force touch, normal touch, delete. Click on this guy, confirm. It should have popped out and said we're deleting row 0, which is what I clicked. Let's just make sure we can click other rows too. Confirm. Deleting row 4. Okay, so we're definitely getting the right index at that point. So I want to do this a different way now. So we're going to create a function. Let's say it's called this delete helper. And this guy will take in no parameters. And we're going to go ahead and just do that print statement in there.
do fancy invoking to get back to the main thread so that we can call the instance variables.
Well, we've basically done that with the static.
Right, but I'm saying if we didn't want to use the static, could we invoke back to the main thread?
We're still in the main thread. We just don't have the environment.
The main scope. Whatever you want to.
So I'm going to try to write our own handler here. So instead of a closure, I'm going to say delete helper. I think this should do it. Does this need to be? I think this might need to specifically return a void. Oh, handler requires a closure? I don't think that's right. Maybe I just don't put double quotes around it.
Is it really complaining you threw closure into lambda?
Well, and it seems to be reading it the right way. So this guy takes no parameters and returns a void. It's showing us something that takes no parameters and returns a void, but it doesn't want it to be owned by main screen IC. Let's look at something here. Swift. Let's call this handlers. Well, that's so informative there. I just want to see if we can create our own handler function other than a closure.
Call the helper function as one of those.
Oh, I suppose we could do that. We could call it from the closure.
Well, no, I'm saying, could you call it as, could you, like, typecast the function to whatever the alert action that it's trying to.
Well, we might not have to, is what I'm getting at.
Well, then you're kind of just doing the same thing, except for just putting it somewhere else.
Well, not necessarily. It might give us a different. So let's do this. Do this. And then instead of printing here, we're going to call self.delete helper. Has no member. How you type NS object? Oh. This guy is looking in, so his context is inside of NS object. So what we're sitting in right here, his whole world lives inside of NS object, not inside of main screen IC. It's very strange. I don't know if it's necessarily a problem. Just strange. Yeah, seems like it has to be a closure. Well, there you go. So we'll take that guy out. We know we have the value now. All right, so we're gonna remove at index this guy, so that'll actually remove it from. It's just weird. So that'll remove it from our roles. Now we also need to update our strings, right? Don't we have a second thing inside of our dice roller singleton called? There's the roles, or do we build that? We call update or generate table. Generate table grabs our number of rows. Creates our labels, all that stuff. All right, so we're actually saving it in will activate. This is when we're saving. So we're appending to our roles. Then we're updating user defaults. So that's our save, right? Then we're calling generate table. So I think we need this. Those two lines. We'll go ahead and update user defaults and then generate our table. Oh, but we're going to have the same problem. Yuck. Double yuck. So I can remove at that index, but I can't call those functions in there because we're not in a context where we have access to those.
Do those need to be, can you make those functions static?
Yeah, we can. Let me look at those functions. So we have update user defaults. It's going through. Yeah, I think we can make that static. It's not. I mean, but we do need to be careful by making this static. We need to make sure we're not using self dot anything in here. In this case, we're not. What about rebuilding our table? So generate table. Yeah, here we're accessing the table. So if we make this static, we no longer have access to the table. Well, actually, let's check something here real quick. It might not be a problem. Let's take these lines out of here. Let's go back to will activate. So now all we're going to do and inside of our confirm is we'll remove it from our roles. I want to know if do we call will activate after that. So does will activate get called? Oh, we need to unstatic that guy. So if will activate gets called after that, then we would be back inside of our context where we have access to all this stuff. So our hope is that we can, we'll just talk through what's happening each step. So I'm going to go to a deep click here, light click. Now we're in delete mode. Then I'm going to go delete this guy. When I do that, it's going to give us the pop-up. When I hit confirm, it's going to just delete that row from the roles, our global roles, which we can do. Okay, so we've already proven we can get the selected row in there. Then we're hoping it goes back to will activate. And if we do go back to there, then we just need to know that we need to still update user defaults and that stuff. So hopefully after we click confirm, we know that the roles has changed, but will activate get called. I don't know if it got called that first time or not. All right, will activate did this if we have dice. Well, here, let's just cheat it real quick. This isn't really efficient, but we'll just always update user defaults and generate the table every time we come here. So we'll know it gets called if the table does update when we run this. So now I'm not just updating user defaults and generating the table when we actually have a new dice. We're just doing it literally every single time the screen activates, regardless of why we came here. I think I did the same thing I did last time. There's some like weird hack thing I'm doing with like caps lock. Did we have this last class too? Where I clicked funny. Delete. So we're going to delete the 7D6 one. We'll confirm. It looks like it did delete it. All right. So it all has to do with kind of juggling our will activate. So will activate gets called when we come back from a previous screen. It also gets called when we dismiss an alert. All right. So so the important thing we need to understand here. Let me kind of actually open up the presentation stuff because that's an important tool we want to have available to us. 390. All right, so when we talk about contexts, this is the environment in which we are currently executing. I have it set to view only. Why would it still do this? All right, so the environment in which we are currently executing. Inside, so let's kind of look at this a couple times. So inside a alert, just reopen it. Are any of you updating this file? Because this is what happens when in other classes, when it's editable and somebody is it's not, but that doesn't mean that there's not something jacked with iCloud. Okay, so alert.
It's Gracie at home. She's trying to get your attention.
Alert closures operate within an NS object context, which effectively means only, well, it effectively means this. Self is an instance of NS object. What, now that I think about that, let me try something here real quick. I'm going to set this guy, oh, where am I at? Main. I'm going to make this an instance method again, or an instance field, cur selected index. We're going to update it down here. I want to know if it's just not a casted version. So for instance, instead of saying that guy, I want to say self as a main screen IC dot cur selected index. Okay, so it's saying I'm casting from an NS object. Oh, it's telling me it always fails, but
Yeah, worth a shot.
so in this case, self is, oh, self is actually a function. So in our 470 term, self is a lambda expression. It's not an instance of NS object. It's a function that takes no parameters that's owned by NS object.
Returns that version of main screen IC.
Is self just the parameters you're passing in, essentially? So if you try to pass in like an int, will self.
Well, there is no parameters being passed in.
Right. So I'm saying if you like pass in like an int, would self be that int that you're passing in, or is self just something completely?
Well, let's find out. Let's see what self knows. So self is a function. All right, so this guy is going to give us this error. Okay, so this is an NS object function that returns main screen IC, but I don't have that return value. Closure, let's do Swift, closure, accessing, calling instance. Closures are reference types. You know, that's just weird how it's implemented. There's got to be a good reason for it. I mean, if you really needed to access a lot of instance stuff, what you could say is you could do something like var or static var cur instance is equal to self. So now you could say main screen IC dot cur instance and actually have a link to self. So now in here I can say main screen dot cur instance dot cur selected index.
Cur selected index. No, what the?
I think it wants me to probably do this as a main screen IC.
The Swift of this is a keyword too.
Self is the same.
This is just
Oh, very interesting. All right, well, let's continue on with this context thing. So alert closures operating within an NS object context. So self is not an instance of NS object. It's an instance of NS object function, which returns, let's just say returns something. It's passed by reference, like they said, so a function is a first-class object. So self is an object in that case, but it doesn't. We're living completely outside of our current context. So that closure, even though we're writing it inside of main screen IC, doesn't know anything about main screen IC. It's a complete self-contained little thing. So alert closures live there. So in our example here, main screen, so things in main screen IC that are not closures have access to the full context of main screen IC. So we always want to think about context in terms of what do we currently have access to in terms of the environment, the variable and function environment. And inside of a closure, we don't have access to much. So that does end up becoming a limiting factor of closures, where closures can perform logic, but since closures are written generically and we can have callbacks. So the purpose of a closure is to deal with handlers. So basically a callback function that when something has finished, call this function that does something. We don't have any guarantee about what environment that function will, what environment you will currently be swimming in when that callback happens, because we need to think about the ability to pass closures as parameters to, well, the ability to pass functions as parameters to functions, which is the idea of a closure, has to be written into the language generically. So since it has to be written into the language generically, when Apple wrote this stuff, they had no idea what context any individual closure would actually be living in. They didn't know that our closure would be living in the context of main screen IC here, or within the context of another Swift file. So it seems like the decision they made is to just make closures self-contained little bombs that we pass around that are not impacted by the outside world at all. So rather than Apple trying to hook it onto whatever context you're currently in, somehow, which would have required them to modify the definition of NS object, which doesn't seem like it should have been that big of a deal. But rather than do that, they just said that a closure is always in its own little world. So if we need to give it access to the outside world, it has to be through a static context. We don't have access to instances. So I suppose that's fair enough in this case. So we'll go ahead and I even tried to cheat it and say set cur instance here to be self.
Did you change it to a pointer? Do you leave pointers to self rather than setting it to self itself?
Well, I think we do have. It's protected. It's immutable. So it won't let us give it direct memory access. Yeah, it's pretty locked down. It's interesting. All right, no worries. We can still pull it off. We just have to play by their rules. So we'll make that static like we did before. This is main screen IC dot. That, and then this guy down here is main screen IC. we'll hit play here. All right, so let's go ahead and get rid of the 22D20 because that just seems ridiculous. So now we are in delete mode. So we'll go down here and go to that guy. Do we want to definitely delete that? Yes. He's gone now. Let's go ahead and restart the app and make sure that he stays gone. Okay, and he does. Go ahead.
Can we create an optional parameter that defaults to selected index? So when you pass it in, it should automatically default to the optional parameter of selected index rather than having to force it to something? Does that work?
You mean in the closure?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, no, because the alert, that handler for the
Right.
alert gets called by the alert when we hit those buttons. So he needs to know that he's supposed to pass something in. And since we didn't write that,
If it's optional that defaults to selected index, it should be able to call it without parameters.
right, that's true, but it would never call it with parameters.
No, and that's fine because the optional would default to a selected index. So if you don't,
But then if it never called it with parameters, that selected index would never.
Yeah, I mean, you would never have that index. You could say I want it to be an optional, but so you're the alert, and when somebody hits that confirm button,
how optionals work in Swift compared to.
all an optional says is I'm a variable that may not have a value. It doesn't change the fact of that somebody, in this case, you want to change the parameter to be an optional.
So I guess the definition of optional I'm thinking of is there a way to have a variable in a parameter that if you don't pass anything to it, it will default to something else? So if
Well, you could have it. You could have it default to a literal value.
You couldn't have it default to a variable.
I mean, I suppose you could, but it would have to be a static variable in this case because of the context it's living in. But because we probably could, if we really needed this to do something special,
Yeah.
we probably could do something called a category, where we can extend the UI alert class and say that UI alerts, and then what we do is we would override that function that does the callback for the handler, and instead of having it do the default callback where it passes no parameters, we would have it pass one parameter, the current selected index. But wherever that's at, that guy would have to have access to the current selected index to pass it in, which is probably going to happen through our singleton, that global variable. So we're playing in the same mud regardless. So this guy is meant to do logic blind to a specific context. Yeah, interesting enough, I guess. Okay, well, we'll finish this app on Wednesday, then decide if we have anything else we want to add to it, and then we'll come back after break and start something new. Do begin to mentally prepare yourself for an exam, probably the Wednesday after break, but no homework for today, and you won't have homework next class either. But there might be a quiz next class, so don't skip. All right, I'll see everybody on Wednesday.